welcome back to our channel. Not all pennies are created equal, and these years prove it. The 1974 penny might look common, but rare aluminum test strikes and off-center errors make it a jackpot for collectors. The 1985 Lincoln cent hides die cracks and striking flaws that go unnoticed, and can be worth big. And the 1995 penny? Spot a double die on the obverse, and you're looking at serious money. Tap like and subscribe. Your everyday pennies might be hiding big surprises. It was buried beneath a thick layer of dust inside an old mason jar sealed with rusted metal, hidden in the far corner of a Kansas farmhouse basement. The jar, once used for peach preserves, had long since lost its purpose, now holding what appeared to be nothing more than a chaotic jumble of old copper pennies. It was the kind of forgotten relic most people wouldn't spare a glance. But for Emily Rain, a history teacher with a passion for coins passed down by her grandfather, that jar held the promise of secrets. She had stumbled on it while helping her cousin clean out their grandparents' estate. At first, it was just sentimentality that drove her to unscrew the lid. Then it was curiosity. But within minutes, it became obsession. She began sorting the coins on an old workbench, creating piles by decade, 1940s, 50s, 60s. The 1970s pile grew fast, full of darkened, heavily handled coins. That's when she spotted the one that didn't look quite right. The date was 1974, just like dozens of others, but the surface shimmered differently. It had a soft, silvery tone, not the reddish-orange of a standard copper cent. She rubbed her thumb across the surface. The texture felt off too, lighter somehow. At first, she thought it was worn down. Maybe corroded. But then she noticed something else. The edge of the coin was smooth and rounded in a way that didn't match the rest. It didn't feel like copper. It didn't sound like copper when dropped lightly onto the table. The ping was sharper, brighter. She froze. Emily pulled out her phone and began searching. She knew about steel cents from 1943, knew about zinc coins from 1982, and about the bronze composition of most pennies pre-1982. But this, a 1974 cent that looked silvery? That wasn't something she'd seen before. And then she found it. A mention on a forum. A coin that shouldn't exist. The 1974 aluminum cent. Her breath caught. She reread the post again. In the early 1970s, the U.S. Mint had been experimenting with alternative metals to reduce the cost of coin production. The price of copper was rising rapidly, and the Treasury feared the cost of minting a 1-cent coin would soon exceed its face value. In 1973 and 1974, several test strikes were created using aluminum planchets, lightweight, silvery coins meant to replace the traditional bronze cents. Over 1 million were struck in 1974 alone, but before they could be circulated, the Mint reversed the decision. The aluminum cents were ordered to be destroyed, but according to numismatic whispers, a few survived. Perhaps fewer than a dozen. The Mint has denied their existence for years, calling them classified test pieces, never meant for public hands. It was even reported that officials actively tried to reclaim every known example. Some were handed out to members of Congress and later recalled. A few vanished. One surfaced at a coin show in the 1980s, only to disappear again. Emily's hands trembled. Could this be one of them? She brought the coin to a local coin shop in Topeka. The owner, a grizzled Vietnam veteran with decades behind the counter, blinked when she showed him the coin. Then he fetched his scale. A standard copper penny from 1974 should weigh about 3.11 grams. He placed her coin on the scale. It balanced at exactly 0.93 grams. His eyes widened. Without a word, he opened his safe, pulled out a rare coin book, and began flipping through the pages. He wasn't just surprised, he was stunned. He told her gently that the coin could be something very special, and that it needed to be seen by professionals. Emily sent the coin to be analyzed by the Numismatic Guarantee Company, where it underwent a battery of tests: weight, diameter, specific gravity, and metallurgical composition. Under scanning electron microscopy, the results were conclusive. It was struck on an aluminum planchet. The surface bore no signs of post-mint alterations or plating. It had been struck by official U.S. Mint dies, intended for the 1974 Lincoln cent. The detail was crisp, the relief high, and most importantly, it was real, but the world of rare coins is rarely simple. As word spread, Emily found herself contacted by journalists, collectors, historians, even lawyers. The U.S. Mint, upon hearing of the coin's discovery, issued a careful statement expressing interest in retrieving test specimens not legally issued for circulation. This wasn't a request, it was a warning. Previous owners of similar coins had been forced to surrender them under pressure, as the government claimed they were never legally released and therefore remained government property. Emily was told she might have to give it up. But she refused. Backed by legal counsel and the support of prominent numismatic figures, she argued that the coin had been found in a private estate, had changed hands unknowingly, and had been outside of government control for decades. With no clear chain of custody and no evidence of theft or illegal activity, the case became murky. After months of tension, the Mint quietly backed down. No lawsuit was filed. Emily was free to keep the coin, but the moment of vindication was only the beginning. Auction houses began calling. Some offered 6 figures on the spot. Others requested to feature the coin in elite showcases, calling it a ghost coin, a relic of a cancelled plan, an official U.S. Mint product that was never supposed to survive. It wasn't just rare. It was forbidden history in physical form. Coin collectors from around the world began speculating how many more might exist, if any at all. Theories swirled. Were there more in other congressional archives? Had others slipped through mail rooms or been smuggled home by Mint employees? If so, where were they? Emily chose not to sell right away. She lent the coin to a museum exhibition that traced the evolution of U.S. coinage, where it sat under glass beside other experimental pieces and prototypes. Visitors marveled at it, a small, seemingly unimpressive piece of metal, surrounded by a storm of controversy and legend. And even then, its true market value remained a point of speculation. Years passed, but the interest never faded. The coin was insured, tracked, handled only with gloves. Collectors made private offers. She finally agreed to part with it in 2024, through a sealed auction limited to elite bidders. The sale was held in a quiet hotel ballroom in Chicago, attended by a dozen participants. The final bid shattered expectations. The 1974 aluminum 1-cent penny, hidden for nearly 5 decades in a forgotten jar in Kansas, sold for a price between $55,000 and $122,000, the exact figure kept confidential at the buyer's request. But the real value of the coin wasn't just in its metal or its price, it was in its defiance of history. A quiet survivor of destruction, a secret that escaped the melting pot, a whisper from a moment when America's money almost changed forever. It started with a copper gleam. Just another coin rolling across a tabletop in an aging Midwestern antique shop, overlooked in a dusty tray labeled "loose change, 25 cents each." No fanfare, no spotlight, just another 1985 U.S. 1-cent coin among hundreds that had lived their years forgotten, passed from hand to hand, vending machine to coat pocket. It wasn't supposed to be anything more. After all, 1985 wasn't known for producing landmark pennies. At face value, it belonged to the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, no mint mark, over 5 billion of them pressed into existence. And yet, tucked in that bin of obscurity, one coin bore a secret beneath its surface. The coin itself wasn't flashy. Its luster had dulled, its surface marred with faint scratches from a life of transactions. But in the careful hands of Harold Denton, a retired machinist and part-time coin enthusiast, it spoke differently. He had wandered into the shop after lunch, just killing time. His eyes weren't even on the coin when he picked it up. He liked the weight of it, the way it felt thicker somehow. He examined it more out of habit than curiosity, his thumb tracing the raised edges, the familiar Lincoln profile staring rightward with calm solemnity. The date, 1985, was clear. The Liberty inscription slightly shifted, but not enough to raise alarm. Still, something gnawed at him. He held it to the light, tilted it slowly, and that's when his stomach tightened. The "In God We Trust" inscription seemed off. It wasn't just the alignment, though it did appear pushed north, creeping almost into the rim. It was the faint doubling of the letters, especially on "Trust," a spectral shadow trailing each character. Not a typical machine doubling, not the mushy kind caused by die wear. This was sharper, more intentional, as if it had been struck twice but refused to admit it. His heart rate picked up. He didn't say anything. Not yet. He bought the coin, slid it into his pocket with the ease of someone who didn't want to draw attention to buried treasure. At home, under magnification, his suspicion sharpened. The doubling extended across Lincoln's eye, even the bow tie. More than that, the rim itself had an unusual extra thickness in certain quadrants, suggesting a misaligned die or hubbing error during its minting. But this wasn't the type of doubling associated with mechanical error or die deterioration. This was deliberate, what numismatists call a doubled die. But a 1985 doubled die penny? That shouldn't exist. Nothing in the Red Book, nothing in his catalogs, and certainly nothing in his memory suggested such an anomaly. The Philadelphia Mint had no known double die errors in that year officially listed. And yet, here it was, undeniably altered from the standard. He brought it to a coin show in Pittsburgh 2 months later. Among tables of Morgan dollars, silver dimes, and proof sets, Harold found a specialist, Ralph Mendez, a man known for identifying anomalies the mint never acknowledged. Ralph squinted at the coin for a long time, silent, breathing shallowly. "Where did you get this?" he finally asked. Harold's answer, "A quarter bin in Ohio," only made Ralph chuckle in disbelief. He asked to borrow the coin for a few hours to run it through comparisons, overlays, and die markers. Harold agreed, albeit nervously. When Ralph returned, he was holding the coin like it might ignite. "This shouldn't exist," he murmured, confirming Harold's suspicions. The die used was unlike the standard 1985 hub. The doubling matched no known catalog die pair. What's more, the fields of the coin bore minute inconsistencies, as if the die had been modified or incompletely polished before being used. There was also evidence of a minor misalignment, Class II doubling, possibly compounded by rotation. No other coin like it had been recorded. Not one. And the implications? Monumental. If real, if verified, it meant the Philadelphia Mint had a rogue error on their hands, one missed by inspection, or buried deliberately. Harold had a treasure in his possession. But he didn't realize how much until whispers began circling online forums. After Ralph discreetly published photos on a numismatic community site under the pseudonym CoinHunter85, collectors started speculating. Some argued it was a well-done counterfeit. Others demanded proof, die diagnostics, authentication. But the spark had caught. And soon, private collectors began reaching out. Quiet inquiries, subtle offers, all coded with caution. One collector from Arizona offered $17,000 just for the chance to examine it firsthand. Harold declined. Over time, as speculation grew, so did the coin's mystique. It was dubbed the Phantom Double Die of 1985, a name that gave it weight, drama. Some suggested the die used was a test piece, never meant to be deployed for full circulation. Perhaps it had been used during a transitional phase, an experimental die that slipped past quality control. Or perhaps, more conspiratorially, it was an internal test that someone at the mint tried to erase by melting down the resulting coins. Except this one survived. Just one. And that made all the difference. Within 2 years, the coin's value ballooned. Auction houses began reaching out, offering to list it under experimental error category. PCGS and NGC both authenticated it as genuine, placing it under the umbrella of unattributed die varieties, pending formal listing. The authentication certificate alone turned heads, its classification vague enough to cause debate but strong enough to signal rarity. It sold at a silent auction in 2017 for $28,000 to a private bidder in Connecticut. But that wasn't the end point. 3 months after the sale, a second coin surfaced. Nearly identical characteristics, same doubling on Trust, similar distortions on Lincoln's eye, and that same extra thickness in the rim. It had been sitting in a collection since 1985, mistaken as a common penny. The collector, a man named Edgar Moore, had no idea of its significance until he saw an article referencing phantom double die. When he examined his penny with renewed eyes, he realized it matched almost perfectly. Submitted for authentication, it too was confirmed. A second one. And just like that, the singularity unraveled. Now, the discovery didn't decrease the value, quite the opposite. It transformed the coin from a freak anomaly into a potential series. Collectors went scrambling. Suddenly, 1985 penny rolls were in high demand. Bags of uncirculated coins that had languished in vaults for decades were now being opened, scrutinized, dissected under high magnification. And soon, a third coin surfaced. Then a fourth. But each had subtle differences, some had sharper doubling, others fainter. It was clear, a single die had been used briefly before being pulled, perhaps after striking fewer than 1,000 coins. The mint remained silent, then came the twist that turned the community upside down. A former mint employee, now in his 80s, anonymously leaked a letter to a coin journal. In it, he claimed that during the early part of 1985, an experimental hubbing die had been introduced briefly at the Philadelphia Mint, intended for internal review to test modifications in relief clarity. A small batch of coins, fewer than 10,000, were struck using these dies before the project was scrapped. The coins were supposed to be destroyed. Somehow, a few got bagged and circulated. The letter didn't identify the employee, and the mint refused to confirm or deny its contents. But for collectors, it was enough. The story added a layer of legend, a veil of secrecy. Suddenly, the 1985 error penny wasn't just a mistake, it was a ghost of a forgotten experiment, a survivor of planned destruction. The coin's narrative deepened, becoming less about technical specifics and more about the mystery behind its existence. This elevated the few known specimens to artifact status, not just errors, but pieces of a concealed past. As of now, fewer than 8 verified examples exist. Each bears minute differences, suggesting wear on the die during its brief use. The most pristine specimen, graded MS-66 red, sold in 2023 for $64,500. Its current estimated value exceeds $85,000, with speculation that it may break 6 figures at its next auction. But beyond the value, the coin has inspired a kind of romanticism in the numismatic world, a reminder that even in the most common year, in the most overlooked corners of American change, stories lie waiting. And Harold Denton? He still visits antique shops, still rifles through penny bins, still believes lightning can strike twice. Because in 1985, a routine coin lived a life it was never meant to have. And all it took was someone willing to listen to its quiet, doubled whisper. It looked like any other penny. Slightly worn, copper-coated, lost in the shuffle of old pocket change that had been dumped into a shoebox and shoved into the corner of a New Jersey estate sale. The shoebox wasn't even labeled, just sat beneath a stack of old board games, ignored by the eager antique hunter scouring for rare furniture or vintage watches. But for Thomas Greer, a lifelong coin enthusiast with an eye trained for nuance, there was always magic in the forgotten. He didn't expect anything groundbreaking. Maybe a few wheats, a stray 1970s, or a 1982 small-date variety. Just something mildly interesting. But what he pulled from that box would unravel a chain of revelations no catalog had prepared him for. The coin, dated 1995, felt ordinary. It bore the expected features: Lincoln's side profile facing right, the familiar words "In God We Trust" arched along the top. Liberty hugged the left side, and the date, 1995, was sharp and centered. A Philadelphia Mint coin, like billions of others. And yet, under the low light of the estate sale, something felt uneven. The letters seemed thicker, heavier. Thomas tilted the coin in the light, and there it was, a subtle, almost ghostly duplication shadowing the word "Liberty," and more strikingly, "In God We Trust." Not the sort of shadow left by wear or grime. These were sharp, clean echoes, mirroring the original characters with eerie precision. He blinked. Turned the coin. Looked again. It wasn't post-mint damage. He was certain of that. This doubling was too well defined, too cleanly separated from the primary design. And it wasn't spread evenly across the coin, only the obverse showed signs, particularly in the motto and Lincoln's profile, especially around the eye and the back of the neck. A strange pull tugged at his memory. He recalled vague rumors on a coin forum years ago, whispers of a mysterious double die from 1995, dismissed by some, debated endlessly by others. But he had never seen one. Until now that he didn't buy the entire shoebox. He didn't need to. He slipped the 1995 penny into a coin flip, handed over a quarter, and left with it tucked safely in his jacket. For days, it consumed him. Under magnification, the details came alive. The doubling on Liberty was unmistakable, each letter echoed to the right and slightly lower. In God We Trust had a similar effect, bold and split in places, like an optical illusion made real. Even Lincoln's chin bore signs of overlap, as though the die had slipped, hesitated, and struck again. Thomas began cross-referencing known varieties. Most sources listed 1995 as a mundane year for the penny. Over 6 billion coins were minted in Philadelphia alone, an ocean of sameness. But there it was, buried in the deeper archives of collector databases, mention of a 1995 double die obverse, an elusive variety long debated in numismatic circles. Some claimed to own one. Few had proof. The mint had never confirmed the die error. The community was divided. Was it true double die or just master hub deterioration? But Thomas knew what he saw. And this coin didn't just fit the pattern, it defined it. He submitted the coin to a grading service, half expecting rejection. Weeks passed, and then the package returned. Inside was the same coin, now encased in a protective slab, the label bearing the words, 1995 1C, double die obverse, MS65RD. His breath caught. It was real. Officially recognized. And not only that, graded in mint state, with full red luster. The significance hit like thunder. He wasn't just holding an error coin. He was holding a landmark. News spread fast. The coin community, always hungry for validation, swarmed with renewed interest in 1995 pennies. YouTube videos, online forums, and eBay listings popped up overnight, with hopefuls digging through old rolls in search of the doubling. Coin dealers began highlighting 1995 D and 1995 P cents, though the Denver version showed no known error. It was Philadelphia only. That narrow scope made the variety rarer than most expected. The mint had clearly used a rogue die early in the year, producing the doubled image on a limited number of cents before replacing the die quietly, without public acknowledgement. Thomas's coin became the benchmark. Photographed, referenced, even borrowed for educational displays. Experts now placed the error squarely in the Class V double die category, a pivot in the die during hubbing. It wasn't machine doubling, which tends to look flat and shelf-like. This was sharp, clean, and unmistakable under proper magnification. For years, the 1995 double die had lurked in the shadows of the 1955 and 1972 varieties, both famous, widely recognized, and highly prized. But now, the 1995 penny had stepped into the spotlight, its story backed by authentication, by data, and most importantly, by undeniable evidence. What made this coin particularly unique was how it blended in. The error wasn't grotesque or immediately obvious like some off-center strikes or blank planchets. It masqueraded as normal. It hid in change jars, in junk drawers, in boxes shoved into attics. And for that reason, it eluded detection for so long. Only under scrutiny did its features betray its origins, but the story didn't stop there. In early 2021, a sealed bag of 1995 Philadelphia cents, originally stored at a bank in rural Pennsylvania, was opened during a coin roll hunting live stream. Among the 25 rolls, 3 additional double die specimens were found. The community erupted. The doubling was consistent with Thomas's coin. All 3 were sent for grading and returned with high marks, MS64, MS65, and one near gem at MS-66. It was confirmation that the error was not a fluke, not a one-off mishap. The mint had, however briefly, let a faulty die operate. And now, the race was on. Suddenly, coin shops across the country saw increased demand for 1995 cents. Entire rolls were being bought out, sometimes for 10 times their face value, on the hope that a double die might appear. Dealers who once laughed at the idea were now listing verified specimens at auctions, where competition drove prices to dizzying heights. A low-grade circulated example sold for over $11,500 in early 2022. By 2023, high-grade uncirculated specimens were breaking new records, but then came the twist. An anonymous online bidder, acting through a private numismatic firm, acquired the original MS-65 specimen discovered by Thomas Greer. The final purchase price was never revealed publicly, but reliable sources within the auction world confirmed a range far beyond what even optimistic collectors anticipated. The whispers placed the final sale between $40,000 and $108,000, depending on inclusions and provenance rights. That single cent, once overlooked in a dusty shoebox, had become a six-figure legend, a copper coin that reminded the world that sometimes, history waits quietly in plain sight.